The building was old and abandoned. The windows were boarded up with plywood, causing it to emit an eerie feeling. In short, it looked extremely creepy. Victoria, Marilyn, and I crept up to the abandoned building. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" I asked with skepticism as we neared the front door. "Come on, Ray. We all bet on the dare that the guys made up. We have to do this. I don't know about you two, but I don't want to look like a wimp in front of them," Victoria said as she moved to open the door. I nodded in reluctance and followed her with Marilyn behind me. The door squealed in protest as Victoria pushed it open. "Let's look around." "Victoria, have you not watched any horror movies? This is always where something bad happens to the main character," Marilyn yelled at her. "You're just paranoid," she said as she walked toward a door and opened it. "Ooh, a basement." Victoria walked down the old, wooden stairs toward the basement. Marilyn and I followed, not wanting our best friend to get killed in this creepy place. The three of us reached the bottom of the stairs. "Why does it always have to be dark in basements?" Victoria muttered as she turned the flashlight on her phone. The light illuminated the room. Old furniture and bookshelves filled the room. Most of the furniture had white sheets draped over them. Victoria and Marilyn walked off to look at something across the room. I shook my head at their antics before walking around also. As I was walking, I saw something that resembled a machine in the corner. Not having any idea what it could be, I walked closer to it. The machine was silver with red, blue, and green buttons. I saw a power button and did the one thing the main character always does in a horror film. I pushed the button. The machine came to life with whirring and beeping sounds. Girls, we might want to run," I yelled as I started to back away. Victoria and Marilyn came running over to see what was happening. "What did you do?" Marilyn and Victoria yelled simultaneously once they saw the machine. I didn't have time to answer because a bright light appeared and sucked the three of us into the machine. A loud pow filled my ears, causing me to cry out in pain. Lights flashed around us. The sound of an old train whistling, brass bullets ricocheting, and airplane engines whirring grew louder and louder until it all stopped, and there was nothing but darkness. "Victoria? Marilyn?" I whispered into the darkness. Another bright light appeared in my line of vision, causing me to close my eyes. Am I dead? I opened my eyes to see that I was laying on a couch with Victoria on the other end and Marilyn on the floor. Where were we? Where are we? Victoria asked the same question as she sat up. Marilyn sat up too and rubbed her head. We all froze when there was a knock on the door before it opened. A middle-aged lady in a blue dress walked in. Her hair was in curls like what women wore in the 1940s. "What are you girls wearing? You should be getting into costume. Your performance is in an hour. Get up," she yelled in frantics as she shooed us up from the couch. The three of us jumped up and looked around with confusion on our faces. "What are you waiting for? Get dressed." Victoria, Marilyn, and I ran behind the dressing screen that was in the room. "What are we even supposed to be wearing?" Victoria smarted off once we were behind there. "Your uniforms are hung up behind you. The hair and makeup crew will be in here soon to get you three ready," the lady said before leaving. Marilyn and I looked at each other before looking at the uniforms that hung up behind us. Khaki shirts and skirts with black heels and ties awaited to be put on. "She expects us to wear this?" Victoria asked with a scrunched-up nose. I shrugged in answer. "Let's get this on before she gets back in here," I muttered as I started to put the uniform on. After we got our uniforms on, makeup on, and hair curled, we were led to a stage. The stage was decorated with red, white, and blue flags and streamers. An old microphone was placed in the middle of the stage. I looked over at Victoria and Marilyn in confusion. The lady from before stood on the stage with an impatient look. We climbed onto the stage and stood in front of the audience that was already gathered. "Ray, what are we supposed to do? We don't know where we are, let alone what our performance is supposed to be." Marilyn whispered in my ear. "I don't know. We can always improvise," I suggested with a slight shrug. "You're no help," Victoria said with an eye roll. We were silenced when we heard an announcer speak. I froze when he introduced this program. "Welcome to the USO show. United Services Organization. That was a time machine." I whispered to the other girls low enough to where no one could hear us. "No way. Those don't exist," Marilyn said in disbelief. "Girls, They started USO shows in World War II, which was in the 1940s. That would explain how everyone is dressed. The curly hairdos, women in dresses, men in suits. Shall I go on? Oh no. This is bad. Very bad, I said as I started to panic once again. Ray, calm down. You're overreacting, Victoria said as she put a hand on my shoulder. Please welcome the Andrews sisters. I started to hyperventilate as cheers filled the room with joy. Okay, now, we can panic, Victoria murmured. Girls, it's time for you to perform, the lady said as she pushed us onto the stage. We looked back at her with wide eyes. The sound of a bugle filled my ears. I recognized the song immediately. You better thank me later for this. Just follow my lead, I said. Marilyn and Victoria nodded before following my steps as we twirled and danced along to Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. The audience cheered along, causing me to smile. When the solo popped up, I sung the words with ease and danced just like Patty Andrews had in the 1940s. Well, I guess that would be now thanks to a certain somebody. Cough, Victoria. Cough at the end of the song. The three of us pivoted on our feet and raised our hands up into a salute. Are you glad I made you two listen to this all the time? Yep, Victoria said with a sigh of relief. I giggled as we were led off of the stage and back to our changing room. My only question is how we're going to get back home. I don't know. We probably should be trying to figure that out. I mean, we don't even know how we got here in the first place, I said with worry building up in the pit of my stomach. Obviously, it was that machine, Marilyn said with a smart alecky tone. I rolled my eyes at her bluntness. All of a sudden, a loud siren started to wail, causing all of us to look around in confusion and fear. What's going on? I asked with the fear growing. I already had a suspicion. I just didn't want it confirmed. There's an air raid, someone yelled, causing us to panic. And there it is, the confirmation. A loud whistle was growing louder and louder. Take cover. I hid under a table and covered my head, just waiting for something to explode. Nothing ever came. I opened my eyes to see I was in my bed back in my room. I looked around and sighed in relief. It was all just a horrible dream. I got out of my bed and headed for the bathroom to shower. I looked in the mirror and froze in shock at what I saw. The uniform that I had on in my dream was what I was wearing. If that wasn't a dream, then how did I get home? And where is Marilyn and Victoria? Willow tugs on her hair with stress building as she thinks of the upcoming due date of her next short story. What is she going to do? She has no ideas of what to do for the next story, and with the deadline creeping up on her, she was fit to be tied. Willow releases a breath of air before grabbing a book and sitting on her couch to read. Maybe I can get ideas from this, she thinks as she opens the book to the first page. Hours pass, and Willow is still reading. With no ideas for this story, she flips the page of her book and continues to read her favorite book, Redemption at Hacksaw Ridge. It amazes her how one man could continue to fight for what he believed even when everyone was against him. With the stress of the deadline creeping back up on her, Willow sets the book down and stands up. She walks over to her computer and types the title of her upcoming story. She stares at the computer screen, her fingers resting on the keys ready to type. Nothing comes to her mind, leaving Willow to bang her head against the table. One storyline is all I need, Willow exclaims in frustration. She tugs on her mouse brown hair once again before resting her head against the table and closing her eyes. The sound of knocking echoes throughout the room. Willow gets up from her computer desk and jogs to the door. She opens the door to reveal chaos. She looks around to see people running and screaming in fear and panic. She looks around for whatever is causing the chaos to see nothing in particular that would cause such a mess. Willow runs out into the street amongst the panicking crowd. She grabs a person who was running by and asks what is going on. Can't you see it? That car is on fire. It's going to blow up any minute, the woman cried in terror. Willow looks down the street from where the woman had been running from and sees a car overturned with the engine engulfed in flames. Willow can hear the cries of help from whoever is stuck inside. Why is nobody helping them? Willow asks the woman. Those people need help. Why are you running? No life is more precious than mine, the woman spits before running off with the rest of the crowd. Willow looks in disbelief and disgust at the cowards that run away from doing what is right. I have to help, Willow whispers to herself. She runs toward the burning car. Her feet pound against the pavement as her breath starts to come in puffs. Along the way, she picks up a leather jacket that someone dropped and covers her mouth and nose as she gets closer to the burning vehicle. Help! A voice cries out. Willow looks around for whoever it is that is trapped. Hello? Willow yells over the crackle of the fire. Can you hear me? Movement in the back of the car catches her attention. Back here, the voice calls out. Willow sees a woman in the back seat. My ankle is pinned in between the seat and the roof. Willow climbs into the overturned car and crawls toward the injured woman. Was there anyone else in the car with you? Willow asks as she tries to free the woman's ankle. My baby. She was in the back. Oh God. It'll be okay. We'll find your baby. How old is she? Willow asks, trying to calm the woman down. She's 2. Oh God. What if she's hurt? The woman panics. She'll be okay, Willow says in a calming tone. She finally gets the woman's foot free from where it was pinned. Let's get out of here. Willow hands the woman the leather jacket to cover her face before helping her get out of the car. Once they got out of the car, Willow helps the woman to safety. My baby. Please find my baby. The woman sobs. Willow nods and runs back to the car. She skids to a stop when she sees a car seat in the middle of the street. She runs to the car seat to see a toddler in the seat with tears streaking her face. Willow picks up the toddler and carries her back to the woman. The woman sobs when she sees Willow carrying her child. Willow smiles and hands the toddler over to her mother and sits on the ground. Suddenly, Willow hears an intense screeching sound. The sound overcomes everything. She realizes that the sound is the alarm on her phone. Willow lazily opens her eyes and looks up to see that she is sitting in front of her computer. She looks at the page pulled up on the screen in confusion. At the top, bold letters read, Dreamcatcher. Willow's eyes widen in realization that the day she just witnessed is nothing more than a mere dream. Willow looks down at her fingers which rest on the keys of the keyboard and begins to type her story. The sound of knocking echoes throughout the room. I huffed and puffed as Apache, my MWD, and I ran with the platoon. Jay ran up beside me and kept up with my pace. We were at the front of the pack so Apache wouldn't get sidetracked. Come on, Cameron. Run faster. You're not going fast enough. Jay joked as he ran alongside of me. Payne, I'm going to push you into that lake over there if you don't shut up. I threatened as I wheezed in a breath. Exercise has never been my forte. I believe Apache was panting as hard as I was. We were on the second mile of our run, and I was ready to pass out, which was not a good sign at all. Some idiot in our platoon decided to play a joke on the drill sergeant, which earned the whole platoon a 5-mile run. It's easy for the other guys because they don't have to run with a dog. They also have long legs. Me being a lady and 5 feet 2.5 inches did not help matters. The idiot that got us into this mess was one of my best friends named Alex Johnson. I about killed him after the drill sergeant left the barracks. It's not that bad. Just taking a deep breath of that morning air, Jay said as he took a deep breath in through his nose to emphasize his statement. You really want to go in that lake, don't you? I grumbled as I kept on running. Jay laughed as he sped up to keep up with me. Apache started growling lowly as we neared ducks that were playing in the lake. He's still a young pup, so he's very hyper. Apache, stay focused, I begged. Jay gave me a worried look as we kept jogging. Apache kept growling as we got closer to the ducks. He really doesn't like those ducks, does he? Jay asked with a chuckle. I glared at him as I pulled back on Apache's leash. Apache started tugging hard against the leash until he was almost choking himself. Apache, heel. I commanded as I stopped running and tried to pull the dog away. My command went in one ear and out the next. I pulled back with all the strength I had until I heard a loud snap. I looked down to see that the leash snapped in half, allowing Apache to run after the ducks. Jay and I looked at each other before sprinting after the dog. The men that were running behind us stopped in their tracks to see what was going on. Apache, I called as I dove into the water after him. The guys laughed as Jay and I ran through the water to catch the mud. Jay slipped and splashed in the water, causing the guys to laugh even harder. Apache kept chasing after the ducks and nipped at their feet. The drill sergeant walked up behind the men that were pointing and laughing at us. This can't be good. Payne, Thompson, did you two decide to play in the water? He yelled in annoyance. I knew that man had something against me. The guys that were laughing stood at attention upon hearing his voice. I grabbed Apache's harness and pulled him to shore. Jay followed like a lost, soaked puppy. The drill sergeant marched down the bank and stood in front of us. Jay and I stood at attention in front of him and waited for the yelling to begin. We were dripping wet from head to toe. Our PT gear was wringing wet. Needless to say, we were miserable. "Come with me," he said in a low, calm voice. Jay and I followed without a fight. My shoes squished and squeaked the whole way to his office. "Dear God, please be with us." I looked down at my clenched hands and let out a huff of air. Thoughts swarm my head as I think back over what the last few days held. Everything I've come to know has vanished, all because I was stupid. How could I go on knowing I have harmed a life? How could I continue to live knowing that I ruined someone's happiness, that I ruined a family? I close my eyes and watch as the memories play back like a film in a movie theater. Here we go again. I walk out of the bar with my friends in tow. The sun shines in my eyes, causing me to groan. The three of us had come to have fun after Cassie had a terrible breakup. All three of us laugh and giggle from the alcohol that is in our system. Cassie and Christy stumble on each other as they try to get to the car. I keep giggling as the sisters fall into the car. I climb into the driver's seat and buckle up. "Are you sure you can drive?" Cassie asks drunkenly. I giggle before replying in a shaky voice, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." The sisters laugh again and nod. I turn on the car and pull out of the parking space. I swerve the car onto the road and try to go the speed limit so I won't be caught. The car swerves left and right as I drive down the highway, nearly hitting several oncoming cars. "Turn down through here." Christy giggles from the back of the car. I drive the car down the street Christy pointed. The car continues to swerve left and right, in and out of the lane I'm supposed to be in. Up ahead, I can see kids playing on a sidewalk. The kids come closer and closer as we near them. I watch as the kids scream and try to run away. One little girl doesn't get away in time, and I watch as her tiny, fragile body comes in contact with car. The haunting smack of the girl's body plays through my head as my eyes shoot open. Tears fill them as I think over everything that happened. It's all my fault that girl's family will never see her again, never hear her laugh, and never see her smile. They'll never get to watch her as she walks down the aisle to her awaiting fiancé. They'll never get to see any of that because I took that away from them. I took it all away by being so ignorant. I was the one that got in the car, knowing that it was illegal. I was the one that harmed the girl. It was all me, no one else. No one told me to get in the car. No one held a gun to my head as I made the decision to get behind the wheel. This prison cell will be the reminder to me of what I did to deserve to be here. As time ticks by slowly, I will always have the guilt of killing the little girl and cheating her out of the life that she should have had. She should have grown up and lived her life, but she never will be able to. I stand up and pace around the cell. Why did I have to do it? Why? I'm no better than a murderer now. I pull my hair as these questions swirl in my head. I'm going insane. I tug on my hair harder until I scream in frustration and punch the wall next to me. Pain radiates from my hand up my arm. Blood slowly drips down my hand, causing me to grimace in pain. Shouldn't have done that. Pathetic. I begin to sob as my brain criticizes me even more. This is my life now. I will always doubt myself, criticize myself, and torture myself, all because of the decisions I made. Every time the second hand moves on the clock, I will be thinking about the little girl I murdered by stupidity. I sit back down on my bed and put my head in my hands in hopelessness. The guilt is mine to carry now. The detective walked into the dark room with a hard look on his face. He knew that this could be the career-changing investigation. The light from the single lamp illuminated the accused. The detective walked closer to the man sitting in the chair. "State your name and occupation," he commanded. "I am Sparky Electric, and I am an electric cooperative," replied the man. "I don't understand what is going on." The detective leaned back in his chair and let out a slight chuckle. "I just need to ask you a few questions," the detective replied. Sparky nodded and relaxed slightly in his seat. "Is it true that you are a non-profit organization?" Sparky smiled at the question and replied, "Yes. All cooperatives exist to serve their communities instead of shareholders. They distribute and sell energy at cost and invest any excess revenue back into the electric system." The detective nodded and scratched the growing stubble on his chin. "Interesting," he replied and jotted down notes on his notepad. "Who owns your business?" Sparky smiled again and replied, "Electric co-ops are owned by the people they serve, not by the government, if that's what you're asking." Members elect board members to represent their interests and set policy and procedures for the co-op. The detective wrote down more notes before looking back up into Sparky's eyes. He knew his next question would be career-changing. Do you help the community? Oh, yes, Sparky exclaimed. We serve 2.5 million Tennesseans. That's 1 in 3 Tennessee homes served by a co-op. We keep the lights on, recruit new industries such as factories, and educate the leaders of tomorrow through camps and competitions. Electric co-ops take seriously their responsibility to improve lives in their communities. The detective looked taken aback by Sparky's revelations. He looked down at his notes, then back up at Sparky. Well, Mr. Electric, you're free to go, the detective said in a somber tone. Sparky stood from the chair and began to walk out the door when he turned around and looked at the detective. Can you tell me why I was in here in the first place? You were accused of insufficient work in the community, but it's nothing for you to worry about. I can tell that you go beyond the wires that you work with, the detective said with a smile as he held his hand out for a handshake. Sparky smiled brightly at the detective and shook his hand. He walked to the door and placed his hard hat on his head, heading out for another long day's work. The detective walked into the dark room with a hard look on his face. He knew that this could be the career-changing investigation. The light from the single lamp illuminated the accused. The detective walked closer to the man sitting in the chair. State your name and occupation, he commanded. I am Sparky Electric, and I am an electric cooperative, replied the man. I don't understand what is going on. The detective leaned back in his chair and let out a slight chuckle. I just need to ask you a few questions, the detective replied. Sparky nodded and relaxed slightly in his seat. Is it true that you are a nonprofit organization? Sparky smiled at the question and replied, yes. All cooperatives exist to serve their communities instead of shareholders. They distribute and sell energy at cost and invest any excess revenue back into the electric system. The detective nodded and scratched the growing stubble on his chin. Interesting, he replied and jotted down notes on his notepad. Who owns your business? Sparky smiled again and replied, electric co-ops are owned by the people they serve, not by the government, if that's what you're asking. Members elect board members to represent their interests and set policy and procedures for the co-op. The detective wrote down more notes before looking back up into Sparky's eyes. He knew his next question would be career-changing. Do you help the community? Oh, yes, Sparky exclaimed. We serve 2.5 million Tennesseans. That's 1 in 3 Tennessee homes served by a co-op. We keep the lights on, recruit new industries such as factories, and educate the leaders of tomorrow through camps and competitions. Electric co-ops take seriously their responsibility to improve lives in their communities. The detective looked taken aback by Sparky's revelations. He looked down at his notes, then back up at Sparky. Well, Mr. Electric, you're free to go, the detective said in a somber tone. Sparky stood from the chair and began to walk out the door when he turned around and looked at the detective. Can you tell me why I was in here in the first place? You were accused of insufficient work in the community, but it's nothing for you to worry about. I can tell that you go beyond the wires that you work with, the detective said with a smile as he held his hand out for a handshake. Sparky smiled brightly at the detective and shook his hand. He walked to the door and placed his hard hat on his head, heading out for another long day's work. Kate looked up from the photograph clutched in her hands. She looked down again at the photograph that displayed an old, white door with 4 bloody handprints in the middle of the woods. She looked up at the matching door in front of her and walked closer to it. She placed the folded-up photograph in the sack hanging from her shoulder and turned the knob on the door. The door opened to reveal darkness. Kate looked back behind her to make sure no one had followed her into the woods. She knew that she could get into deep trouble for crossing the police line, but the need to find evidence was overwhelming. She walked through the threshold into the darkness. Once inside, she turned on her flashlight and illuminated the room. Blood covered the walls. Snippets from the trial flashed in her mind. Mr. Sanchez, why was there blood on the walls of the cellar? She asked him as she paced in front of him determinedly. My wife and I held a haunted forest each year. The blood was actually paint meant to scare the children, he lied through his teeth. She knew he was lying under oath. No one listened to her. The jury said it was enough reasonable doubt to set him free, but she knew he had paid them off. She knew he got away with the murder of his wife, but he would not get away with the murder of the other women she knew he had killed. Her best friend was one of his many victims. He paid the officers off so they would twist her story. A pungent, rotten smell snapped Kate out of her thoughts. She flashed her light to her left, revealing a horrible sight. Mangled bodies were piled up in the corner, causing bile to rise in her throat. She walked closer to the bodies and sighed. She pulled out the camera she had tucked away in her bag and started to capture pictures of the mess. She bent down to collect a blood sample to examine closely later. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, the slam ringing through the air. Kate spun around quickly to see a shadow looming over her. She stood and dropped all signs of emotion from her face. "What do you want, Michael?" she asked bitterly. "Oh, darling, I know why you were here," he stated menacingly. "I'm here to collect evidence to put you in jail once and for all," Kate exclaimed. "Oh, darling Kate, you say you were here to find evidence to put me away, but we both know the real reason." Kate looked at him apprehensively. "I know you killed them, my darling child, for you are just like me, your father," he whispered coldly in her ear. Kate's eyes widened before a loud shot rang through the air and darkness overtook her vision. "No further questions, Your Honor," she said before sitting down with a victorious smile. A car drove through the countryside. The sun peeked out from behind the cloud hanging in the sky. U.S. Marine Sergeant Denver Jack breathed out a sigh while pulling at the jacket of his uniform. The stress of the past week weighed down on his shoulders. So much work to do before shipping out in a month, he thought as he turned onto the conjoining road. His eyebrows scrunched in confusion upon seeing a parked car on the side of the road with the hazard lights on. Knowing occupants of the car might need help, Denver pulled in behind the car and got out, leaving his parked car running. "Hello?" he called out as he walked closer to the car. "Do you need help? I can call a tow truck for you if you need it." Denver knocked on the window. He gasped as the window rolled down to reveal a gun pointing at his torso. Blam, 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 the car sped away as Denver's body crumpled to the ground in a bloody heap. Denver gasped as the life left his lungs slowly. No one would be able to find out what happened to Sergeant Denver Jack. No one except for Special Agent Leroy Jethro Gibbs. Officer Ramirez patrolled the countryside, hoping to catch a speeder or two to fill that quota the department recently set. Obviously, no one was happy about it. He drove down the road, letting out a groan upon receiving a call from dispatch about a possible dead body on the side of the road. Ramirez pulled up to a frustrated couple and rolled down the window. "What seems to be the problem, ma'am?" "There's a dead body up there. We stopped to check to see if someone needed help." "That poor soldier," the woman cried in hysterics. Ramirez nodded and pulled on up behind the still-running car. His eyebrows furrowed as he stepped out of his patrol car. Ramirez unhooked the strap on his holster, praying he would not have to use it. He walked closer to the car. Once he saw the body, he walked closer to check for a pulse. Nothing. He ran back to his patrol car to grab the crime scene tape. Grabbing his radio, he let out a huff in exhaustion and requested dispatch to call an NCIS. Ramirez ran back to the scene and rolled out the tape around the area. He walked over to the couple. "Ma'am, can I get you to stand over here?" "I just need to ask you a few questions," Ramirez questioned. Special Agent Leroy Jethro Gibbs sipped his coffee as he got out of the solid black SUV. He let out a sigh as he looked around. He always hated coming to the crime scene of a fellow Marine. "Boss, why can't someone else take the case for once?" Special Agent Anthony Donoso whined from behind. "Donoso," he called over his shoulder, "get to work." Tony let out a groan and got to work searching for evidence. Special Agent Ziva David let out a chuckle and started taking pictures of the body from different angles and distances. "There's some blood spatter over here," Tony pointed, making sure Ziva saw so she could take pictures. "There's also shell casings. Haven't found much else." "Well, get to finding it," Gibbs grumbled as he smacked Tony on the back of the head. Tony grimaced before getting back to work. "Got anything, McGeek?" Tony taunted as he turned to Special Agent Timothy McGee. Tim rolled his eyes before replying with a no. He continued to sketch out the crime scene and made sure to add every piece of evidence that was found. Ziva went around to bag the evidence and label the correct information as Ducky examined the body to see the exact time of death. Gibbs walked toward the distraught couple and asked them the basic questions. "Do you think you'll find the killer?" the lady asked in a small voice. "We will do everything we can," Gibbs replied. "Boss, we've got something," Tim yelled from the now turned-off car. Gibbs rushed over to see an Israeli flag. Ari, Gibbs voiced as he looked at Ziva with worry. Let's go find our killer. N had to write a short story for my forensics class. It had to be about the 7 S's of a crime scene investigation: securing the scene, separating the witnesses, scanning the scene, seeing the scene, sketching the scene, searching for evidence, and securing and collecting evidence. Hope you enjoyed.